Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Seeing people start to trickle in. This is an information session on marijuana delivery in Denver. While we're waiting for people to trickle in, I'm just going to put a poll up here just to get a sense of whether we have, of how many transporters, either licensees or applicants or future applicants, and how many store licensees and applicants we have in the audience. So if you wouldn't mind answering the poll, that would be great. This session will address delivery requirements related to both stores and transporters, but we just want to get a sense of who's in the audience. Give people another minute or two to trickle in before we get started. Just a few housekeeping items as people are joining the meeting. This session is scheduled from 12:30 to 1:30, and we have a hard stop at 1:30. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will try and save a few minutes at the end for questions. Once we get to the Q&A period, I'll ask for anyone who wants to ask a question to use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen to let me know that you'd like to speak. And then I'll promote you to a panelist so that you can unmute yourself and go on video if you'd like to. Excuse me. If you have questions as we're going through the presentation, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box, but we may or may not get to them all. Again, we have a lot of information to share, so we just want to make sure we stay on track. And you can also email us at marijuanainfo@denvergov.org with any questions after the presentation. The presentation, as well as, excuse me, as well as a recording of this webinar, will be posted on our resources and support for social equity applicants website. You can get there by navigating to denvergov.org/marijuanainfo, and then to our social equity webpage. Okay, it looks like our attendees numbers are leveling out, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll kick us off with some introductions. My name is Abby Borchers, and I am a policy analyst with the Department of Excise and Licenses, which issues marijuana licenses. My colleague Joey Pena is also here. He's our cannabis process navigator, and I'm sure many of you have interacted with him before. David Barnes is here from the Department of Finance, and he's going to share some information about tax obligations for transporters and stores doing deliveries. And Casey Hilton is here from the State Marijuana Enforcement Division, and we're glad to have her here to answer any questions related to state rules. And with that, I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. Okay, so starting with kind of the most basic question here is, who can deliver marijuana to patients and consumers? So starting here on the left-hand side with this first yellow box, are you or do you plan to be a licensed retail marijuana store or medical marijuana store, or a licensed retail or medical marijuana transporter? If the answer to that question is yes, I am or will be a licensed retail or medical marijuana transporter, we're going to follow this green path at the top. And the answer is you may conduct deliveries to patients and consumers, but only pursuant to a contract with a store. So in order to do deliveries to patients and consumers as a transporter, you have to have a state transporter license, a Denver transporter license, a state delivery permit, and a Denver delivery permit, and then a contract with one or more stores that will be supplying the products to you that you'll be delivering to patients or consumers. Going back to our yellow box at the beginning, if you are a licensed retail or medical marijuana store and you want to do deliveries, you must contract with a transporter to conduct those deliveries on your behalf. And that's a requirement in Denver until July 1st, 2024. So the state allows for stores to do deliveries and transporters to do deliveries, but in Denver, stores cannot do deliveries until July 1st of 2024. They have to contract with a transporter or one or more transporters. So in order to do deliveries through a transporter, a store has to have a state delivery permit and a Denver delivery permit, as well as a contract with one or more transporters. So back to our yellow box here, are you a store or a transporter? If the answer is no, I have another type of marijuana license. Maybe it's a manufacturing license or a cultivation, or you're planning to get a different type of license. You may not conduct deliveries at all through a transporter. So cultivations cannot do deliveries. They can't use a transporter to do deliveries.
Hello?
Same for manufacturing facilities.
Is now a good time?
Transporters can only
I still haven't gotten anything.
Sorry about that. Transporters can only source products from stores. So where can marijuana be delivered? Marijuana can be delivered to a private residence in Denver, which includes but is not limited to a private premises where a person lives, such as a private dwelling, a place of habitation, a house, a multi-dwelling unit for residential occupants, or an apartment unit. Marijuana can also be delivered to a private residence in any other Colorado city or county that has affirmatively allowed for marijuana delivery. So that means if you're going to deliver to another city, that city has to have voted to allow for marijuana delivery. If they haven't voted on marijuana delivery, or if they voted to ban marijuana delivery, you can't deliver there. Marijuana cannot be delivered to any premises located at a school, an institution of higher education, so college campus or college dorms, public property, so government buildings, libraries, rec centers, commercial property such as offices or retail space, or a drug or alcohol treatment facility. Marijuana also cannot be delivered, like I said, in any city or county that has not affirmatively opted to allow marijuana delivery. And then marijuana cannot be delivered to a consumer or a private residence where the licensee knows or reasonably should know that the consumer or private residence has already received a delivery that same business day. So the burden here is really on the licensee to make sure that you have procedures in place and precautions in place to make sure that you're not delivering to the same home or consumer multiple times in the same day, but just paying attention to that knows or reasonably should know language. So if your delivery driver makes a delivery at a home and then comes back 2 hours later to the same place, they should know that they've already been there that day and not complete that delivery.
Abby, we had a quick question on that slide in the chat that I just wanted to flag. There was 2, I think, or 3 folks who asked about hotel delivery and whether that might fall into the category of commercial property. So I wanted to see if Casey or someone on the line may be able to answer that question about hotels and whether that is considered commercial property for the purposes of delivery.
So I can jump in as far as the state's concerned, that if someone is actually residing and living at that hotel and the hotel allows it and the local licensing authority allows it, that it would be considered somewhere that you could deliver to. Again, just a lot of small things come into play with that one. So you really have to make sure you've got, like Abby said, your processes in place to ensure that that person actually does live there.
Thanks, Casey.
And then, thank you, Casey. One other quick thing, Abby, some folks are asking about accessing slides and recording after this. So just to get that out of the way, the recording will be posted on our website, and the access to the slides will also be available after the presentation. I'm not sure whether we plan to send a bulletin out about that, but we can share the link, and I can share the link in the chat about to our website so that they can find those resources.
That's a great point, Joey. You can always go to denvergov.org/marijuana-info, and that will take you to all the different marijuana related websites that you need. So if you go to denvergov.org/marijuana-info and then navigate to the social equity web pages, that's where we're going to post the recording of this as well as the slides. Probably in the next few days. It won't be immediately after this meeting. Okay. Oh, there's another question in the chat that I just want to address really quickly. If a store is owned by a social equity licensee, do they need to contract with a transporter? Yes, you do. So all stores are required to contract with a transporter to do deliveries in Denver. So continuing our conversation about where marijuana can be delivered. So there on the left side, obviously delivery within Denver is permitted. So from a store in Denver to a consumer's house in Denver, the store supplies the product, they accept the order from the customer, and then they contact their contracted transporter to have them come and pick up the order, and the transporter takes that order to the customer's house. For cross-jurisdictional deliveries, you have to be careful to make sure that you have the appropriate Denver licenses and permits that are required. So let's say a store in Denver wants to make a delivery to Aurora because Aurora has allowed for marijuana delivery. So you could take a delivery from a store in Denver to a house in Aurora. The store would accept the order from the customer whose house is in Aurora. They would contact the transporter and have them come pick up the delivery. And then that transporter would take it to the customer's house in Aurora. The transporter has to have a Denver transporter license and a Denver delivery permit. If you're a transporter and you have an Aurora transporter license and an Aurora delivery permit, you can't just use that to come into Denver and pick up an order and take it into Aurora. You would have to have, in addition to your Aurora transporter license or Aurora Denver or Aurora delivery permit, you would need to get a Denver transporter license and a Denver delivery permit in order to pick up that order from a Denver store. If there's a store located in Aurora, for example, or another jurisdiction that allows for delivery, they could also deliver to a customer's house in Denver. But again, they would have to accept the order and then contact a Denver licensed transporter with a Denver delivery permit with whom they have a contract to do deliveries and have that transporter pick up the order and take it to the customer's house in Denver. So all of this is to say that licenses and permits issued by other cities are not valid in Denver. So to deliver into Denver, you have to have a valid Denver transporter license and a valid Denver delivery permit. Does a transporter need a licensed premises? A transporter is not required to maintain a licensed premises in Denver, although you can. If you don't have a licensed premises anywhere, you only need one state transporter license, and then you can connect that state transporter license to transporter licenses issued by multiple local jurisdictions. So if you have your state transporter license and then you get your Aurora transporter license, which is tied to that state transporter license, you can come to Denver and get another Denver transporter license and have that be tied to your state transporter license. State rules do require a transporter to maintain a licensed premises if it temporarily stores any marijuana or if it modifies any information in the inventory tracking system generated transport manifest. If you do decide to have a licensed premises in Denver, a transporter's licensed premises can only be located in certain zone districts, which are there on the right in the yellow chart. And within those zone districts, the premises has to be at least 500 feet away from a residential zone district.
Abby, if you don't mind, just on that point, I do want to underscore that folks who are getting a no premise transporter license at the state, if you're getting a no premise transporter license at the state and applying first for your Aurora delivery permit, Denver isn't necessarily receiving that state application for your no premise transporter license. So please contact us at marijuanainfo@denvergov.org. If you have submitted a state no premise transporter license application and you are interested in pursuing a license and a delivery permit in Denver, reach out to me or to marijuanainfo@denvergov.org so that we can get that application from the state and start to process it here in Denver so that we can get your application process moving. It's generally wherever you apply first. So if you apply for that no premise transporter license and you're applying first for your Aurora transporter licenses, Aurora's receiving that application. They're receiving the application fee that's remitted to the local jurisdiction. So we aren't necessarily seeing any of that. I do want to be sure that if you're pursuing that no premise transporter application and you have questions or you haven't been contacted by Denver, that you are reaching out to us so that we can correct that as soon as possible.
Thanks, Joey. All right. I just want to go through some of the operating requirements for delivery businesses or stores that are choosing to do delivery. So stores and transporters must obtain a responsible vendor designation prior to conducting their first delivery. So all employees need to go through that responsible vendor training in order to get that responsible vendor designation. The Marijuana Enforcement Division has a list of approved responsible vendor program providers on their website. And there's a link there, which will be available when we post this on our website for you to click on, but you can also just navigate to the Marijuana Enforcement Division's website and find that list of responsible vendor program providers. Deliveries are allowed to occur between 8 a.m. and midnight. Stores can accept orders 24 hours a day, but they can only send orders out for delivery between 8 a.m. and midnight. A medical or marijuana store may accept orders for delivery, but transporters may not accept orders for delivery. So like I was describing before, the store will accept the order from the customer and then contact their transporter and ask them to come and pick it up and take it to the customer, but the transporter will not be accepting orders. In terms of payment, a medical marijuana or retail marijuana store may accept payment for delivery through any legal method of payment, including but not limited to gift card prepayments, payments on delivery, prepayment accounts established with the store, online payments, or cash. The only exception is that payment with an electronic benefits transfer services card is not permitted. And then for age requirements, patients and consumers must be at least 21 to order and receive a delivery. The parent or guardian of a patient who's under 18 may accept deliveries on the patient's behalf, but deliveries to patients ages 18 to 20 are not permitted under any circumstances. So this is really important as we're talking about age requirements. As the licensee, you are obligated to verify the customer's proof of age. And then if they are a medical marijuana patient, you'll also need to verify their medical marijuana registry identification card. So for medical marijuana, prior to transferring the order to the patient, the licensee delivering medical marijuana to the patient or to the patient's parent or guardian must inspect the patient or parent or guardian's identification and their registry identification card. They must verify the possession of a valid registry identification card, verify that the information provided at the time of order match the name and age on the patient or parent or guardian's identification, and verify that the identification and registry identification card belong to the person receiving the delivery. In Denver, you must use an electronic ID scanner to verify the ID presented as proof of age. Obviously, you won't be using an ID scanner to verify the medical marijuana registry identification card. That ID scanner requirement is just for the proof of age. You can learn more about what medical marijuana registry cards can look like on the Colorado Department of Health and Environment's website. And there's a link to their example cards that you can look at and click on when this is online. For retail marijuana, prior to transferring the order, the licensee delivering retail marijuana to a consumer must verify that the person accepting the delivery has a valid ID demonstrating that they are at least 21 years old. And again, in Denver, you have to use an electronic ID scanner to verify that ID. And then verify that the person accepting the delivery is the same person that placed the order for the delivery. If any of these identifications cannot be verified or look false, or the person is underage, you must refuse to complete the delivery and return it to the store or to the off-premises storage facility from which it came. All of this is really important because a violation related to not checking age identification or to transferring marijuana to someone who is underage is very severe and could result in significant action against your license. And it can also impact your ability to get licenses in the future. So these are really important steps to take and to educate your employees about. And these are also things that are covered in the responsible vendor training that delivery businesses are required to undergo. So there are limits on the amount of marijuana that can be delivered via delivery or sold to consumers via delivery. And they are the same as the limits for in-store shopping. So for medical marijuana, it's 2 ounces of marijuana, up to 40 grams of marijuana concentrate. That number is being reduced to 8 grams of marijuana concentrate effective January 1st, 2022. So that's something to be aware of. Right now it's 40 grams, but come January 1st, that number will be reduced. And products containing up to 20,000 milligrams of THC. For retail marijuana, the limit is 1 ounce of marijuana, 8 grams of marijuana concentrate, and products containing no more than 10 80 milligram servings of THC. And those limits apply individually or in any combination. The limit is per business day, and a licensee may not deliver to a consumer, patient, parent or guardian, or private residence where the licensee knows or reasonably should know that has already received a delivery that same business day. And that restriction applies even if a person placed a delivery order for less than the total delivery limit. So if someone ordered half an ounce of marijuana in the morning and then received that delivery and then placed another order later in the day for another half ounce of marijuana, you still couldn't return to that house and deliver it to them because they've already received a delivery that day, even though it's less than the total limit that they're allowed to purchase. Okay, let's talk about delivery motor vehicles. What is a delivery motor vehicle? The state defines a delivery motor vehicle as any self-propelled vehicle that is designed primarily for travel on the public highways, that is generally and commonly used to transport persons and property over the public highways, or a low-speed electric vehicle that is used for delivery of regulated marijuana to patients or consumers, except that the term does not include electric assisted bicycles, wheelchairs, or vehicles moved solely by human power. We receive a lot of questions about different types of vehicles and whether they would be allowed. I would suggest just reading this definition and asking some questions to yourself about what type of vehicle you might want to use. For example, a bike. A bike is moved solely by human power, and so that would not be allowed because vehicles that are moved solely by human power are not delivery motor vehicles. A delivery motor vehicle must be registered in the state of Colorado, and it must be insured. It must have a tracking system capable of recording the route taken by the vehicle while conducting deliveries that can be accessed remotely in real time by the store or transporter, but the real-time location of the vehicle cannot be displayed to patients or consumers. The vehicle must not have any external markings, words, or symbols that indicate the vehicle is used for marijuana delivery or is owned or leased by a marijuana business. And the vehicle must be equipped with a security alarm system and must have a secure, locked, opaque storage compartment that is securely affixed to the vehicle for the purpose of securing marijuana. The delivery motor vehicle must be equipped with video surveillance that records the marijuana storage compartment and the front view of the vehicle. And that video surveillance must be retained for at least 40 days so that law enforcement can access it if needed. An enclosed delivery vehicle may not contain more than $5,000 in retail value of marijuana. That's a Denver specific requirement. So the state allows enclosed delivery vehicles to contain up to $10,000 in retail value of marijuana, but in Denver, that number is $5,000. So when you are operating in Denver, you have to operate under Denver rules. So if you're operating in Another city that has aligned with that $10,000 limit, you can have up to $10,000 in retail value of marijuana in your car. But as soon as you cross into Denver, you need to reduce that to $5,000. A non-enclosed delivery vehicle may not contain more than $2,000 in retail value of marijuana. That's in alignment with the state. Delivery vehicles must have receipts or a record of sale for each item in the vehicle so that it shows the retail purchase price of the marijuana so that law enforcement can verify during a traffic stop that the marijuana is from a regulated source and meets that inventory limitation. And then only persons with an employee license or an owner license identified on the transport manifest may occupy a delivery motor vehicle while conducting deliveries. So each person in the vehicle during the delivery has to have a badge issued by the Marijuana Enforcement Division and has to be identified on the transport manifest. And then I would suggest reviewing the Marijuana Enforcement Division's delivery compliance checklist, as well as reading all the MED rules related to delivery to make sure that you're complying with all the requirements for delivery motor vehicles. State law requires stores to collect a $1 surcharge on every delivery. And each month, stores must remit revenue from the $1 surcharge to the jurisdiction where the store is located. So if you look here on the right, if you're a store and you deliver, you use a transporter to make a delivery to a consumer's house in Aurora, you're collecting that $1 surcharge on that delivery. And then because the store is in Denver, you're remitting that surcharge revenue to the city of Denver. Conversely, if you have a store in Aurora and you use a transporter to make a delivery to a consumer's house in Denver, you're collecting that $1 surcharge on that delivery and you're remitting it to Aurora. And then obviously if you're a Denver store delivering to a Denver consumer's house, you're remitting that surcharge to Denver. Stores will be able to pay the surcharge using a payment portal on Excise and Licenses website, and no in-person payments will be accepted. So I'm going to turn it over to Joey to walk through the application process.
All right, thanks, Abby. So who can apply for a delivery permit? We kind of covered this at the beginning. The folks who can apply for a marijuana delivery permit are new retail and medical marijuana transporter licensees who qualify as social equity licensees and retail and medical marijuana store licensees. So you cannot apply for a marijuana delivery permit if you are a cultivation or a manufacturer licensee. You have to be a new retail and medical marijuana transporter licensee that qualifies as a social equity licensee or a retail or medical marijuana store licensee. To apply for the permit, you must have an active marijuana store license in Denver, or you must have submitted new state and Denver marijuana business license applications for a new marijuana store transporter license, or have an active state transporter license and have submitted a new Denver transporter license application. So this can get a little bit confusing for folks, and we're getting quite a few questions about how to apply and what the application process looks like. So there are some folks who, when Aurora legalized delivery and allowed for transporters and stores to obtain delivery permits, some folks started the process of getting a no premise transporter license at the state and had active licenses at the time Denver started to accept applications. So those folks had active no premise state transporter licenses and were submitting new Denver transporter license applications to us. That state license could be attached to those city licenses, and so they were able to apply for a delivery permit. There's also existing stores. So if you have an existing medical or retail store license, you can submit an application. It's relatively easy for our existing store licensees to do that, and applications at the city can be approved relatively quickly. We do require that you have a state delivery permit. So you will have to obtain your state delivery permit before we can issue the city delivery permit. One thing that I would note about these applications that we're seeing, because we're working through them, these are still kind of the first applications that we're seeing for the delivery program, and so this is new to many of us, is folks are putting vehicle information on applications, and they're not necessarily intending to use those vehicles for delivery. If you include vehicle information on your Denver delivery permit application, we will be doing inspections of those vehicles, and they will be required to comply with all city and state rules for delivery motor vehicles. So we've seen some folks who've included personal vehicles because they think that they need to have a vehicle on an application. It is not required to have a vehicle on an application. Let's say you are a store and you are going to be contracting with a transporter because you're required to conduct deliveries. The store may not have any vehicles listed on their application. The transporter may have those vehicles listed on their application. If you are not using a vehicle for the purposes of conducting delivery, and it's not going to be in compliance with all rules for delivery motor vehicles, and it's not going to be inspected, then it does not need to be included on the application. So we just want to be really clear on this point that if you have questions about this application process and who can apply, that you're reaching out to us so that we can start to work through them. The email address that you can reach out to, again, is marijuanainfo@denvergov.org. If you have questions about that, sort of to circle back on a point that I made earlier, if you started this process to obtain your no premise transporter license and apply for Aurora licenses and delivery permits, then Denver hasn't necessarily received a copy of that application. So I would encourage you to reach out to us to say, hey, we've submitted an application to the state for a no premise transporter license. We are working through the Aurora process, and we would appreciate if you would obtain the application from the state so that we can start the process with Denver. So if you have any questions about this or you're feeling a little bit uncertain, do let me know. And what I would say is that we're also adjusting some of our applications because of some of the questions that we're receiving. We're seeing the need to be a little bit clearer, more explicit in the direction that we give on those applications, particularly around the vehicle requirements, and also creating forms and processes for adding vehicles. So for example, if you start your business with a single vehicle, creating a form and a process for you to add 2 or 3 more vehicles as your business grows and as you have more contracts with stores. So with the application process, this is how it looks at a very high level. For some of you, it may look a little bit different, and we can go into some of those details too. But at a very high level, you are completing and submitting a state delivery permit application, and that you're submitting a complete state marijuana delivery permit application with all of those required documents and the state fees to the State Marijuana Enforcement Division. This is also sort of parallel with having a business license application. So you may be doing this if you're a transporter. You may be doing these things simultaneously, where you're submitting your state transporter business license application and your state delivery permit application. In both of those cases, you're required to start with the state. You're required to submit all of those required documents and state fees to the State Marijuana Enforcement Division. And then you would be invited to submit applications to the city. So that's if you're applying for a business license. If you're just submitting a delivery permit application, you can complete that city application, and there are we have a website down here at the bottom that has sort of a step-by-step process for how you would do this, but you're completing that city application, and it has to include all of the required documents. It has to be a complete application. Like I said, we're going to be updating that application over time just to try and make it clear and respond to some of the feedback that we've received from these early applicants. You submit that city application. This is a really important part of this process. That application, the city application, must be submitted to exlsubmit@denvergov.org. Do not make an appointment to submit that application in person. These applications require a different team to review and process. And So that team, those applications can't be accepted by our front of house licensing technicians. So we're requiring that they be submitted to exlsubmit@denvergov.org. So your delivery permit applications, exlsubmit@denvergov.org, no in-person submissions for those applications. You'll receive an invoice. You'll pay the required fee. So a city licensing technician is going to provide that invoice during or after the application intake. And then we do your city application review. The city licensing technician is reviewing the application. We're reviewing all of the required documents. If you have a pending new marijuana business license application, we are going to simultaneously review your marijuana delivery permit application. The marijuana delivery permit can't be issued before the new business license is issued. So let's think through that for a second. If you're applying for a new transporter license, the transporter license has to be issued with the delivery permit. We can't issue the delivery permit first because it's a requirement that you have the transporter license in order to obtain the delivery permit. So we would be reviewing those applications simultaneously, and we would have to approve them simultaneously. So in that case, you won't receive your delivery permit before you receive your transporter license. That's not possible. So you would expect to have both of them reviewed simultaneously and then issued. You will have to complete inspections. So when we complete our review of the application, the licensing technician is going to provide you with an inspection notice, if applicable, to complete the required inspections. So why does it say if applicable? Only applicants who have delivery vehicles listed on their application are required to complete inspections. So for our marijuana stores who are existing and they are applying so that they can contract with transporters to conduct their deliveries, which they're required to do, those stores may not have any vehicles listed on their application. They don't have to have vehicles listed on their application, in which case they would not be subject to inspections for review of their delivery permit application. And then we would kind of move on to the next step with them. So inspections are only required if there's a motor vehicle that's listed on the application. And inspections are absolutely required for every motor vehicle that's going to be used to conduct deliveries. So we are going to be looking at video surveillance and to make sure that you have the appropriate opaque lockbox for the product, to make sure that it's securely affixed to the vehicle. We're going to be looking at all of the state and city requirements to be sure that you're in compliance with that for those delivery motor vehicles. So again, just to reiterate, some stores that don't have delivery motor vehicles are not going to be subject to inspections if there's no motor vehicles that they're actively using, that they're providing to a transporter. The next step after you've completed the inspections, passed the inspections, is emailing excise and licenses. So after you complete the required city inspections, if applicable, you're going to email exlapplications@denvergov.org with your business file number. That's your BFN. That's your city license number. So you have state license numbers, you have city license numbers, and the city calls ours business file numbers. So your BFN, a copy of your state delivery permit, and a request to issue your new city delivery permit. And then we will issue your delivery permit. This absolutely, I understand, seems a bit difficult to navigate. We've been trying to work as closely one-on-one with our applicants as possible to help them through this process and to make it seem as clear as possible. So stores that have submitted applications, I've tried to reach out to them as soon as possible so that we can talk through the applications. In some cases, they're listing delivery vehicles, but have no intention to use them for delivery, in which case that's not necessarily something you want listed on the application because then it's subject to inspection. So we're trying to work with our applicants really to help them understand what these requirements are and how to get through this process as quickly as possible. And I think that so far things are going a little bit smoothly. So what we're going to do is really try to, like I said, adjust our applications, continue outreach so that we can make this feel a little bit clearer for you all. And then down there at the bottom, there is a link to Denver's delivery permit application website, which I said earlier has a step-by-step process for how this kind of looks.
And then there's a question, do the store's initial application for a delivery permit have to include the transporter contract, or can we have that contract established after we've gotten our marijuana delivery permit? So the answer is no, you don't have to have your contracts with your transporters established at the time that you apply for a store marijuana delivery permit. You can establish those contracts after you've gotten your marijuana delivery permit. So we don't ask for that contract on the application.
Yeah, and I would just encourage everyone to kind of look at the required document section of the application. The required documents will tell you exactly what's required on that application. For transporters, it's proof of social equity eligibility. It's also proof of vehicle insurance registration, but we do not require you to provide copies of those contracts. I imagine that for some folks, those contracts may change. You may work with transporters, you may work with multiple transporters. And instead of requiring stores to provide those contracts every time something changes, we're not requiring those contracts to be provided on initial application or kind of throughout the application process. And I think that answered two questions that Joey had posed about that. It was maybe one of the very first questions that he asked, and then he asked again. And then there is a question about, do we have samples of contract templates? No, we do not. That would be something that folks would have to probably consult with legal counsel to better understand what those contracts may look like. But it is a private agreement between the store and the transporter. And so that would have to be worked out between those parties. And then to Sam's question, what's the process for alerting the city to change in transporter contract? It's not necessary to alert us when you've changed contracts with transporters, but it is required that stores are working with transporters to conduct those deliveries. So we would encourage everyone to maintain compliance. Obviously, if there is not compliance with that particular rule, then disciplinary action could be initiated. So we're not requesting the contracts, requiring the contracts, but it is required that folks are in compliance with that. And the last question that I'll kind of answer here that I see is, as a social equity licensee, will there be a list of stores with delivery permits? I'm not sure that we've discussed how that might look or how it might work, but it's excellent feedback, Desiree, something that we can certainly consider how that information might be made public or available. And so we will talk through that on our team. And then everyone who's here today, if you are not signed up for our industry bulletin, I would absolutely encourage you to get signed up for the industry bulletin, because those kinds of resources, these kinds of presentations are the things that we're sharing through the industry bulletin. So if that's something that we're able to provide in the future, it's certainly possible that that information would be provided through an industry bulletin. So just get signed up if you're not. And then local fees, is this me, Abby?
Yes.
Excellent. So for medical marijuana transporters, application fee, license fee, this is one time and annual. So for our social equity applicants, the application fee is $0. That is waived on initial application. And the license fee, which is annual, is $1,500. So with your initial application for a medical marijuana transporter license, you would not pay an application fee, you would pay a $1,500 license fee. I just want to remind you, these are city fees only, these are not marijuana enforcement division fees. So you also have to add marijuana enforcement division fees on top of anything that you would see here. For retail marijuana transporters, for social equity applicants, there is not an application fee, that is NA. It is a fee. The application fee for, it sort of looks different for no premise transporters versus transporters who will have a licensed premise. That fee comes from the Marijuana Enforcement Division. They're required by statute to collect an application fee and remit it to the local jurisdiction. So for transporters with a licensed premise, that would look a little bit different, like I said, than transporters with no licensed premise. And for retail marijuana transporters, that first year license fee the annual license fee is $2,500. It's $0 for the first year. So it's waived with your initial application, and then when you renew, it's $2,500. For medical and retail marijuana delivery permits, the same is true for for both of those for social equity applicants. At the city, it is a $0 application fee, and it is a $2,000 annual license fee. So on initial application, you would pay that $2,000 license fee. Just to give you a really quick and high level, this is what you would be applying for. If you were applying for a retail no premise marijuana transporter license, you would not pay a fee. You would not pay an application or license fee to the city for that retail marijuana no premise transporter license. And if you were applying for a retail marijuana delivery permit, you would not pay an application fee for the delivery permit. You would pay the $2,000 retail marijuana delivery permit fee. So your total would be $2,000 the first year. And then the next year when you renewed, it would be $4,500. It would be the $2,500 annual license fee for the transporter license and $2,000 annual license fee for the marijuana delivery permit. So this is going to look different. We get a lot of questions about fees. People always want to calculate, and we understand that there's that it can be tricky with access to capital, and you're trying to figure out exactly what the licensing fees may cost. In some cases, it depends, and so we have to work through that and sort of discuss, is it a premise transporter, is it a no premise transporter, and then look at how that all shakes out to get you an accurate estimate.
Okay, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. This will be more helpful when the slide deck is posted on our website, because you can click on all of these links and they will take you to some resources for Denver as well as some resources from the state. But I just want to highlight those bolded bullet points. It's really important that you read Denver's marijuana code, which is the Denver Revised Municipal Code, Chapter 6, Article 5. Those are Denver's marijuana laws. And also read the state marijuana enforcement division's regulated marijuana rules, particularly paying attention to rules for transporters if you're a transporter, delivery permit rules, and rules for stores if you're a store. And there's just lots of different resources on the state's website, lots of resources on our website. So I would recommend checking those out, as well as subscribing to Denver's Marijuana Information Bulletin and the MED's email list. So now I'm going to turn it over to David Barnes from Department of Finance to talk about the tax obligations that stores have and the tax obligations that transporters have who are doing deliveries.
Okay, thank you. And first I'll go ahead and cover the store sales tax issues. Basically, if you're a store in Denver, you're already licensed for sales tax. There's just some minor differences between point of sale sales and delivered sales. Basically, for point of sale sales, it's obviously based on where the store is located because they're picking it up at that store. However, for delivered sales, the sales tax is due based on where the customer is located. So if the customer is located in Denver, Denver sales tax would be due. If they're located in Aurora and you have a license to deliver into Aurora, then Aurora sales taxes would be due. And the same thing, if you're an Aurora store delivering into Denver, you would have to be licensed for Denver sales tax and collect the Denver sales tax on those sales to Denver customers. If you're delivering to Aurora or any other jurisdiction that allows delivery, do contact that other jurisdiction for their licensing requirements and to get the license for those locations there. Now, as far as verifying the address of your customer, you can go to the state's website that's on the slide here, colorado.ttr services. And basically that will tell you which city and taxing jurisdiction that address is in. You cannot really rely on the city name itself. There's a lot of places that say Denver as their mailing address that will actually be in an unincorporated Adams County, Arapahoe County, or even Aurora, Littleton, etc. So do use the website. If it's not in the Denver jurisdiction, or a jurisdiction that you can deliver into, do not make that sale because you're kind of running afoul of some other jurisdictions' taxing requirements. And don't charge dimmer tax on an Aurora sale or vice versa, because that's also going to cause various issues and problems for you there too. The other main difference is that sales tax is due on the entire sales price that is charged to the customer. So, the amount you charge, whether it's for product, delivery, the surcharge, everything that the customer is being charged for is subject to our sales tax. And the rate in Denver is at the medical rate is 4.81%. For the recreational rate, it's 10.31%. So again, that kind of covers the main issues for the stores. For the transporters, you're not actually collecting sales tax. These stores are processing the orders and doing the sales, so they're going to be responsible for collecting the sale amount, delivery fees, surcharges, et cetera, and they will also collect the sales tax. However, a transporter would be responsible for the occupational privilege tax, which is like a payroll tax for doing business in Denver. There's two parts of that. There's $5.75 for the employee part for any employees that you have, and then $4 for the employer for every position in Denver that makes over $500. Now, if you're a individual sole proprietor, you don't owe the $5.75 portion, you just owe the $4 portion, and you can pay that on an annual basis. So you pay $48 per year at the end of the year, basically in January following the year there. If you, however, are employing people, let's say you have under 10 people or you have more than one person that's in your transporter business, then you would have to be collecting tax for the employee portion and the employer portion, and you have to file either quarterly or monthly, depending on how many employees you have. If it's under 10 employees, it's quarterly. If it's over 10 employees or 10 or more, it would be monthly. And basically, if you're a sole proprietor or a partnership or an LLC filing as a partnership, you would not owe the employee portion on the owners. They're not considered employees of the organization. But if you're filing as a corporation or an LLC as a corporation, you would owe both parts, even for the owners. And again, for the sole proprietorships, partners, and LLCs as a partnerships, they would owe the $4 per employee per owner per month. There's no minimum earnings on that. It's no matter what kind of business you're operating in, as long as you have operations in Denver, you do owe that $4 per month amount there. And if you have any other questions about how our sales taxes apply or occupational privilege taxes apply, you can go to our website at denvergov.org/treasury. And on that, you can get more information about sales and use taxes, occupational privilege taxes. You can also apply for the account. For a sales tax account, there is a fee for that. Or no, there's no fee for that. And it's for a 2-year term. And also for the occupational privilege tax account, you can also apply for that on our website. And if you have any other questions about sales tax or OPT, the occupational privilege taxes, you can also contact us at tresinfo.com. That's TREASINFO at denvergov.org, or call us at 720-913-9400. But I'll turn it back to you, Abby.
Great. Thank you so much, David. So if you have questions about Denver's marijuana rules, Denver's licensing process, you can always email us at marijuanainfo@denvergov.org. And if you need help in Spanish, you can email licenses@denvergov.org and they can help you get a translator. If you have questions about the state's licensing process, you can use the Marijuana Enforcement Division's inquiry form, which is linked there. Sometimes it's hard to know if things are really are better questions for the city or for the state. And so sometimes if you direct questions to us that are really better for the state, we'll direct you to the state to make sure that you're getting the right answer from them. So I'm going to.
Abby, I have a couple of things just in the in the Q&A that I wanted to highlight really quickly.
Sure.
The first being the most recent question we received, and some of these are out of order, so I apologize. But David's presentation on tax really kind of segued nicely into Ken Allison's question. Ken asked, what's the biggest mistake people are making on the application forms that are being sent to your office? I don't so much tend to think of these as mistakes. These are absolutely new processes and applications that we're navigating together. We're still learning about these requirements together. I think folks have a lot of questions about the occupational privilege tax license for transporters. And so I highly encourage you to check out when this is posted, the FAQ and the resources that are linked on the slides that were provided there to learn more about the occupational privilege tax. And if you have questions about that OPT, to please reach out to our partners in the Department of Finance so that you can get your questions answered. Folks have been asking me a lot of questions about the OPT, and I can't necessarily answer that. It's a little bit outside of my lane, but do want to be sure that our applicants are connected to resources to get their questions about that answered. So I, again, don't really think it's a mistake. I think it's a new requirement that folks are wrapping their minds around and trying to get familiar with. I think it's something that is absolutely critical to their ability to stay in compliance. So we want to be sure that they're plugged into resources around the occupational privilege tax piece. The other thing that we're seeing on applications, I mentioned before, is delivery vehicle information. Some folks including delivery vehicles that they are not intending to use for delivery, but because they're putting them on an application would require that that vehicle be subject to inspections and all of the rules and regulations that apply to delivery motor vehicles. So if the vehicle is not being used to conduct deliveries, then likely it does not need to be included. You don't need to include a vehicle just for the sake of putting a vehicle on there. And then for particularly transporters with no licensed premise, we see a lot of folks who are including a physical address of a marijuana facility. If you are a no premise transporter, you have a mailing address and somewhere where we can contact you to do business with you, but there is no physical address for a marijuana facility. That's more for our stores, cultivations, manufacturing facilities. The physical address is also for a transporter who has a licensed premise, who is temporarily storing marijuana or is modifying information in the metric transport manifest. So if you are no premise transporter, very likely you don't need to include on your application a physical address because it raises some questions for our licensing technicians when you've indicated that you have no licensed premise and then you say that you do have a physical address. So it's something to be aware of. Again, if you have questions about that application, reach out to us at marijuanainfo@denvergov.org. Like I said, these are absolutely brand new processes, new applications. We're taking your feedback. We're trying to incorporate those into the applications to make them clear, to make our processes easier to follow. So please reach out if there's something that's confusing or you have questions about. And then there was one more question if someone here wanted to add, it was just adding on top of the hotel piece, was someone asked about Airbnbs. And I'm not sure if that got answered live or if it was answered here, but someone asked if Airbnbs, how we would be, can product be delivered to Airbnbs? If that's similar to hotels or really what that looks like. And I'm not sure how state or city rules might interact there. And I don't have the answer to that question. So I'm throwing it out there to you, Casey. I didn't queue you up. I'm sorry.
No, so that one, I think it's not, it kind of falls back into that hotel answer where if it's like a tourist at an Airbnb, that's not their residence. They don't live there. So I think I can follow up to get to be sure that that's the correct answer, but as far as I can tell, it seems like that would be it. But I can follow up with that, and Joey and Abby, I can get you a response on that one.
That would be great. And I think as we continue to kind of build out FAQs and things, addressing some of that for you all so that you can maintain compliance is really critical. Thank you, Casey.
Okay, that brings us to 1:30. I'm glad we got to address some of these questions in the Q&A as we went through the presentation, but if you have more questions after this presentation, please feel free to email us at marijuanainfo@denvergov.org, and we will get this recording posted on our website, and as well as the slideshow so that you can click on all the links here in the next few days. So thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.